Welcome back for another deep dive. We're going to be looking at how business schools signal their research performance in the global marketplace.
Oh, interesting.
We'll be looking at excerpts from this fascinating research paper. It's titled Research Performance as a Quality Signal in International Labor Markets. Visibility of Business Schools Worldwide Through a Global Research Performance System. Quite a mouthful.
Yeah.
Really, though, what we want to unpack is how this signaling system works.
Yeah.
Why it matters and what it tells us about the landscape of business schools around the world.
Sounds good.
So to kick things off, it's kind of like how companies are always trying to attract the best and the brightest.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
In a globalized economy, business schools need a way to, signal their quality and stand out from the crowd.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. It's similar to how companies try to, attract top talent. Business schools in this globalized economy need a way to signal their quality, right? They got to
Yeah.
stand out.
But how? It's not as simple as putting up a billboard, is it?
Yeah.
It's not like everyone knows what makes one school better than the next.
Exactly. Potential students and faculty are faced with this huge information overload. I mean, how do you even know where to start?
Oh, true.
And this is where the whole idea of signaling theory comes in.
Uh-huh.
Schools use these signals and things like their research performance, to really convey their quality in a way that's easy to grasp.
I get it. We've all seen those business school rankings. But you know what they say about judging a book by its cover?
Oh, absolutely. Those rankings definitely have their limitations.
Oh, yeah.
They often focus on this, small group of elite institutions.
Right.
And a really limited number of journals, leaving out a vast majority of schools that might be doing incredible work, but they just don't fit into that narrow box.
Yeah, so you could be at a school that's doing cutting-edge research, but if it doesn't fit those ranking criteria, it's almost like you're invisible.
Precisely. And that's where this research in the GRP system come in. This system analyzes data from, get this, 3,352 institutions in 127 countries.
Wow.
It casts a much wider net using data from 149 high-impact business and management journals and looking at research output over a longer period.
So much more comprehensive than just looking at a handful of schools.
Definitely. And another thing that sets the GRP system apart is that it uses this measure called visibility adjusted volume, which looks at both the quantity and the quality of research publications.
I see. So it's like acknowledging that some publications just have a bigger impact than others.
Exactly. Not all journals have the same visibility or influence. And by adjusting for this, the GRP system provides a more nuanced and accurate picture of research performance across the globe.
That makes sense. What are some of the interesting things this system has revealed?
One key finding is that while English-speaking countries still kind of dominate those top spots, there are some notable exceptions. For example, Erasmus University in the Netherlands and INSEAD, which has campuses in France and Singapore, are doing incredibly well on the international stage.
That's great to hear that high-impact research isn't limited by geography or language. Any other surprises hidden in this data?
Well, the field of international business research is becoming much more decentralized.
Oh.
The U.S. share of research output in this field is actually decreasing, which suggests that other regions are stepping up their game.
Fascinating.
What else? Another critical insight is that high performance isn't a one-size-fits-all concept.
Oh, I see. Can you give an example of what you mean?
Sure, let's compare Ireland and Hong Kong. In Ireland, a business school might be considered high-performing with, say, around 478 units of visibility-adjusted research output over a 9-year period. But in Hong Kong, the benchmark for high performance is much higher, about 400 and 570 units.
Wow. So depending on where a school is located, what's considered good can vary dramatically.
Exactly. Context matters. What's high performance in one country or region might be completely different in another. That's where the GRP system's granularity is so valuable.
Yeah. It avoids imposing a one-size-fits-all standard and instead gives us a more nuanced view. But how does this research relate to our listeners? Who should care about this?
If you're thinking about joining a business school, whether as faculty or a student, or you're already part of a business school community, the GRP system offers some really valuable data for making decisions.
You mean it's not just for the academics who are crunching the numbers, but it can also help individuals make informed choices about their future.
Absolutely. And it's especially useful for those who want to think outside the box, and maybe discover some hidden gems that might be a better fit for them.
So it can open doors and expand possibilities.
Exactly. And for those who are already in a business school, it offers valuable data for benchmarking and strategic planning.
This is really interesting. I have one more question, though. You mentioned visibility-adjusted volume earlier. How is that visibility actually calculated?
Oh, that's a great question. The visibility score for each journal is calculated using a pretty sophisticated algorithm that was developed by Guinness, Metzen, Walsh.
A Guinness.
Yeah, like the beer.
Okay.
It's not just based on impact factor. It looks at a range of factors, including citations, editorial board prominence, and the journal's overall reputation.
So it's a much more comprehensive way of assessing a journal's influence than simply relying on impact factor.
Exactly. It gives us a more nuanced understanding of a journal's standing within the academic community.
So it sounds like we're talking about a new way of looking at research performance that's
Hmm.
more inclusive and nuanced.
You got it. And the really interesting thing is this global signaling system isn't just for business schools. It can be applied to other fields as well.
Now that's interesting. I can't wait to hear more about that. But for now, we'll have to pause our dive here.
We were talking about how this research could be used in other fields, not just for business schools.
Right.
Like imagine a consulting firm is trying to hire someone with international experience.
Mhm.
They could use a system like this to, really assess the research performance of universities around the world.
So instead of just looking at where someone went to school, you're getting a deeper dive into, the research environment that shaped their skills.
Exactly. It's like getting this whole new level of insight into their capabilities and potential.
I like it.
And it's not just consulting, right? Think about engineering firms or tech companies or healthcare organizations, any field where research is really key.
This could totally change how organizations evaluate talent globally. But let's go back to the business schools for a second. We were talking about how the GRP system kind of highlights some unexpected players in the research world.
Right. The data shows that Danish business schools are doing incredibly well, especially in international business research.
Really? I have to admit, Denmark wouldn't have been my first guess for a research powerhouse.
Right.
Why are they so successful?
It's likely a mix of things.
Yeah.
Denmark has this strong culture of collaboration, right? And the government really supports research. Plus, they've been actively internationalizing their business schools.
Interesting. It just goes to show that innovation can come from anywhere if the conditions are right. But all this talk about English-speaking countries dominating research makes me wonder, doesn't that create a potential bias against valuable research published in other languages?
That's a great point. If we're only focused on English language publications, we're definitely missing out on a ton of knowledge and different perspectives from around the world.
It's like we're limiting ourselves to one tiny slice of the pie when there's a whole feast out there.
Yeah.
So the GRP system is a step in the right direction, but we also have to be mindful of this language bias.
For sure. It's about changing how we think about research and really embracing a more inclusive approach when we evaluate it.
I agree.
Oh, and there's another interesting point in this research I wanted to mention.
Hey, what's that?
The authors emphasize that research performance is dynamic, not static.
Meaning?
The institutions that are leading the pack today might not be the top dogs tomorrow.
So the competition is always evolving, and no one can just sit back and relax.
Exactly. For those established institutions, it means they need to keep innovating and adapting if they want to stay ahead.
And for those up-and-coming institutions, there's a chance to climb the ranks and make their mark on the global stage.
Yeah, exactly. It's like an ongoing chess match, right? Where different players are constantly making strategic moves to gain an advantage.
I like that analogy. It really shows just how much strategic thinking and planning goes into building a successful research program. And this whole global signaling system, it doesn't just benefit the institutions, right? It helps individuals too.
Oh, absolutely. By understanding how research performance is measured and signaled, individuals can make smarter decisions about where they want to study or work, or even who they want to collaborate with.
It's about empowering people to navigate this complex research world and find the best opportunities for their careers and their own research interests.
Exactly. And it all underscores the importance of transparency and having access to data. The more we understand these systems, the better equipped we are to make choices that align with our goals.
So this research is kind of like leveling the playing field, isn't it? Democratizing access to this information.
I think that's a great way to put it. It sheds light on this often opaque world of research performance and gives individuals and institutions the power to make informed decisions. And that leads to a really important question for our listeners.
What would you say is the most important thing when you're trying to figure out how good a business school's research really is?
That's a good question. Would you focus on the volume of research they put out, or would you be more interested in the quality and impact of their publications? What about the range of research topics they cover, or how far their work reaches globally?
It's like everyone needs a personalized ranking system tailored to their own interests.
It's true, and it really highlights the idea that there's no one right way to evaluate research performance. It's about understanding the different factors and making decisions that fit your goals and values.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I think we've really done a deep dive into this whole idea of research performance
Yeah.
and how it's being used as a signal in this global marketplace.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We talked about the limitations of the traditional rankings and the nuances of the GRP system.
And how it might be applied to different fields.
Right.
And we've also touched on some really important questions about diversity and language bias and the need for a more inclusive way of evaluating research.
Yeah, for sure.
It's been a fascinating conversation. I hope our listeners have a better understanding now of how research performance is measured and why it matters.
Absolutely.
Before we wrap things up, I definitely want to encourage everyone listening to check out the GRP system for themselves. You can find a link to the research paper in our show notes. You might be surprised by what you find.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
And until next time, keep those brains buzzing.